Even the revered C.S. Lewis, upon encountering these passages, was forced to infer the extreme conclusion that Jesus was mistaken. There is no coming on the clouds in power. There are no angels gathering up the elect. There is no judgment. There is no end of the age. It doesn't fit. And the only ones trying to make it fit are the ones who cannot entertain the possibility that Jesus made a false prediction. And for Christians, that's understandably too much to swallow. These are the very questions that I was confronted with and wrestled with when I was a Christian, as my faith was slowly deconstructing. And unfortunately, as I was seeking answers, I was encountering the weak ad hoc rationalizations that Christians were promulgating, and I found them to be utterly unconvincing.
This video claims that Jesus was merely a failed apocalyptic prophet and suggests that the Transfiguration narrative was a kind of psychological coping mechanism invented by the gospel writers. Today we're going to carefully unpack this claim and explore a scholarly alternative model, the Galilean Crisis, as articulated by Dr. Tucker S. Ferda. The core of the failed apocalyptic prophet claim is straightforward. It assumes that Jesus predicted an imminent end of the world which didn't happen, leaving his followers to reinterpret events like the Transfiguration as a coping mechanism. But besides the typical conditional prophecy route that people such as Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy and Dr. Christopher Hayes espouses to, there's a serious scholarly alternative that reframes these events completely. In his rigorous academic study, Dr. Tucker Ferda argues that the events surrounding Jesus' ministry in Galilee were part of what scholars call the Galilean Crisis. According to Ferda, Jesus' teachings indeed had an urgent apocalyptic tone, but rather than a failed prophecy, the crisis was rooted in the political and social rejection Jesus experienced from the Galilean communities and authorities. Thus, while Jesus hoped the imminent end would come, he had a change in mind upon the realization that Israel was not on board with this and abrogated his non-dogmatic hopes in turn for an interim period where he would have to suffer and die before the inauguration of an undefined future long after and beyond his own life. Furthermore, scholars like Ferda point out that such narratives aren't reactions to failure, but rooted deeply in Jewish traditions. The Transfiguration echoes God's revelation on Sinai, making it a profound theological affirmation that God can seemingly change his mind rather than a post hoc cover-up. Besides the myriad of Second Temple Jewish apocalyptic texts, early church fathers, notably Jerome citing John Chrysostom's homily of John 2:25, that, quote, knowing well that their warmth was but for a season, he placed not confidence in them as in perfect disciples, nor committed all his doctrines to them as though they had already become firm believers, unquote. In his humanity, Jesus' change in rhetorical goals, though attributed to his ignorance, is ultimately the divine will of God the Father. It is a plan B eschatology, if you will, a reaction to Israel's stubbornness to submit to the Messiah's rule. So was Jesus a failed apocalyptic prophet because the world didn't end immediately? Not at all. Though Jesus' message centered on inaugurating the kingdom of God, the early Christians clearly understood that as a non-dogmatic early hope that did not come into fruition, and yet will still eventually come into fullness in the distant future. The Galilean Crisis model illustrates that Jesus' changing tactics were due not to prophetic failure, but practical and theological responsiveness. Friends, the gospel narratives are far richer and more complex than the simplistic failed prophet theory suggests. Understanding the Galilean Crisis helps us see the strategic, theological, and historical depth of Jesus' actions, reaffirming the coherence and purpose behind the second coming hope that went back to the historical Jesus. For more on this topic, I'd recommend looking at my video on Jesus' apocalypticism refuted, espoused by the recent works of Dr. Tucker S. Ferda. And yeah, thanks for watching. You made it to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell for more content. Got questions or ideas? Drop them in the comments below. Until then, next time, thanks for watching. This is Your Boy Paul signing out. Peace.